there are a range of concerns about our approach.
Representative Joe Sestak, Democrat of Pennsylvania and a member of the Armed Services Committee. Your thoughts on the President's speech last night?
It was a courageous speech. It was the right speech. We took the effort to make sure that through deliberate approach that we have an increase in our troop strength, but one that is primarily focused, as you just heard him, on our relationship with Pakistan. It's really no longer about Afghanistan. It's about the safe haven of al-Qaeda that sits in Pakistan. And this partnership with Pakistan, to where on one side of the border we can close off the Taliban from crossing into Afghanistan, as Pakistan does its job on the other side of the border, is so instrumental, indispensable to our security, because Pakistan is close to a failed state that has nuclear weapons. And if those terrorists gain access to that and to the scientists that have knowledge and access to the radiological material, the cost in years to come will be much greater than the cost of winning this effort today.
How, in your opinion, would you measure success of the U.S. military and the President's proposal in Afghanistan?
Rob, that's a great question, because the one issue that I wish the President had stressed last night was what are the benchmarks to measure success and failure? To me, they are the following. We know that al-Qaeda is a few hundred terrorists on the other side of the border. They're not in Afghanistan. And we know who their leaders are there. How well are we doing in decimating that number? Number two, how well is Pakistan doing in turning into a counterinsurgency force and moving from South Waziristan into North Waziristan? Third, how well are we doing in Afghanistan in leaving conditions behind that are inhospitable to al-Qaeda when we redeploy? The key here to me is not an over-reliance or placing our security in the hands of the corrupt, inept central government of Afghanistan, as the President had in his speech, and I wish again this one had been brought more out, reliance upon local, provincial governors, warlords, tribal chiefs, and actually with only 20,000 Taliban in Afghanistan and 70% of them there for a wage, not ideology, how do you wean them out? And those are the types of benchmarks that give the public an understanding if the strategy is or is not working.
Former Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf had this op-ed in this morning's Wall Street Journal under the title, "The Afghan-Pakistan Solution." He writes, "A military solution alone cannot guarantee success. Armies can only win sometimes and at best create an environment for the political process to work. At the end of the day, it is civilians, not soldiers, who have to take charge of their country."
He's absolutely right. In the last year, I've met twice with former President Musharraf privately, to listen to what his viewpoints were, because he is a military man, as I was with 31 years in the military. And I also was on the ground, both in Pakistan and in Afghanistan early in this conflict. I headed the Navy's anti-terrorism unit after 9/11. I believe what he says. Militaries stop problems. They don't fix problems. And when I was on the ground for a short period of time there, at the beginning of Afghanistan, it was working well. We had brought in the forces that had put al-Qaeda on the run, set up an edifice, a template of security by which the other elements of our power could then work. The power of economic assistance, educational assistance, because in the long term, to fix the illiteracy rate of women in Afghanistan, 98% of them are illiterate, and the 2% that are literate can just about write their name, would probably be one of the best things we could have done at that time to fix this global war of terror. But we did it on the cheap after we went into that tragic misadventure of Iraq, and that's the deal that was handed, the poor hand our president inherited.
We're going to go to the phones, take questions for Representative Joe Sestak, Democrat of Pennsylvania and member of the House Armed Services Committee. Our first call comes from Roaring Springs, Pennsylvania. David, you oppose the president's proposal.
Yes, I do. I'd like to ask him if he's in favor of the draft. And a question I have for C-SPAN, if they would ask people when they call in if they are in favor of the draft, to see if they would really support this war or not if the draft was initiated.
David, why is the draft such an important issue to you?
Most of the people in the country aren't even talking about this war. The people, only the military families are the ones that really talk about it because they have something at stake. The rest of the country has nothing at stake.
Representative.
Boy, what a great question. 1/3 of 1% of all families in America are directly involved in this war, the military families. And it's a tragedy that it took a tragedy at Fort Hood to highlight those military families. So thanks for what you said. I am supportive of national service. But when I joined up, there was a draft back in 1970 as I went into the military during the Vietnam War. But I believe today the draft wouldn't work for the military because these soldiers today, they often have to have a year of training. They run nuclear aircraft carriers. They do sophisticated work. It isn't just a trigger puller. They do much more. So by the time you train them, you need several years to reap back the investment. So my belief is that, yes, there should be this obligation to public service, but let someone go to the AmeriCorps and let those for 2 years, and let someone in the military do 4 or 5 years if that's what they opt to do for their chore. And that's the reason for the efficiency and effectiveness of a much more sophisticated military than when I went in, well, frankly, 35 or so years ago.
Our next call comes from Queens, New York. Anthony supports the president's proposal.
Hello.
Hi,
Go
Anthony.
ahead.
Hello, good morning, sir. First of all, I would like to thank C-SPAN for their coverage of this agenda, and also I am in support of the president. I would like to first answer the last caller's statement and say I'm supportive also of military service, not the draft at this time, as your guest has mentioned, you know, because of the many sophisticated features that we have in our military. I think this is a job, and our military servicemen do it well, and I commend them. I do commend the president, but I also would like to see C-SPAN have a maybe on both sides, because I do understand the supporters who are against the war.
Yes.
I am against war also, but in this time, I believe that we were attacked, and we must go into Afghanistan and finish the job that President Bush left undone.
Anthony, thank you for the overarching point here. Is I respect those who differ from the president or me on this issue, and I'm in supportive of the president. I've been fortunate, and I got to work in the White House with President Clinton as Director of Defense Policy, and I saw the enormity and the deliberateness by which commanders-in-chief, presidents should take this approach to war. But I respect the other side as long as those that are doing it are doing it not out of political calculation, but because they believe it's in the best interest of our nation. I wish we had these discussions, like you just said, basically in my caucus and with the other side of the other party and throughout America. That type of discourse bodes us best.
You mentioned the caucus, and in the Wall Street Journal this morning, this headline, critics from across the political spectrum, or critics from across the spectrum, rip the plan. How will you press forward and the president's proposal in the House so that eventually the funds, which are going to have to come from the Appropriations Committee, get approved in order to support the president's proposal?
Today's a start, right here. And I hope to speak up on the caucus. And in fact, I have great respect for our caucus, but I honestly believe that in the past months this should have been a topic, not infrequently in our caucus, and unfortunately it hasn't been. Afghanistan, Pakistan somehow after March got put on a back burner. I think it should have been on the front burner because it was very obvious months ago that things were still spiraling downward. But I will continue to do, as I'm leaving, you know, I had 2 interviews before this. I finished my last interview at midnight last night, and I started, you know, first at 6. I'll continue and to speak in the caucus. Look, I respect those that differ. But when you weigh the cost and the benefits, and trying to withdraw and deal with this at a larger, farther away distance, when I went into Afghanistan the first time, I met with General Hayden, head of the National Security Agency, before I went in for the mission I had to do. And I never forgot what he told me. He said, Joe, General Franks, who's running this operation in Afghanistan, keeps telling me, give me some actionable intelligence.